and we're picking back up on Transformation of America, the true life story of a CIA mind control slave by Cathy O'Brien with Mark Phillips. Chapter 3. My First President. Muskegon, Michigan is a coastal tourist attraction and home of the annual Seaway and Coast Guard festivals, which bring people to the town from all over Michigan. Vanderjack remained publicly visible through opportunities such as these. My father often could be seen with Vanderjack and was photographed at his side while judging festival events like the kiddie parades, sand sculpturing contests, and so on, all of which I entered and won. In later years, my father polished and shined the red paint of his 1966 Ford convertible to chauffeur Vanderjack through the local parades. This only served to reinforce the illusion that my father was a pillar of the community. In 1973, Senator Byrd instructed my father to send me to Muskegon Catholic Central High School, which was overseen by the director of St. Francis of Assisi Church, Father Lepris. The Catholic Church, of course, has its own political structure, with the Pope presiding over all. The strong political ties between the Catholic Church and the U.S. government was overtly evidenced by the much publicized relationship between the President and the Pope during the Reagan administration. Of course, I had been privy to this political relationship ever since my first communion. A relationship that the right, R-I-T-E, to remain silent was intended to cover. My experience with Catholic Central's district involved in Project Monarch's physical and psychological conditioning further confirmed the union between the U.S. government and the Catholic Church. When Senator Byrd changed my school from public to parochial, he also destroyed through dissociation my school personality. I no longer viewed school as my haven from abuse, as it was controlled by the church and, as I later learned, monitored by a corrupt segment of the CIA. By the time I enrolled in Catholic Church, the cliques and groups had already been formed. I had a personality to fit in with the good kids, and one that interfaced with the bad. It did not take long for the good kids to notice I also got along with the bad. I soon found the only kids that could relate to me were the other known project victims. We clung together in a close-knit group, herded around like the proverbial sheep by those in the school who knew who we were, MPD, DID'd, multiple personality disorder, dissociative identity disorder, and under mind control. We each switched personalities as circumstance demanded. The most often in unison. We were ritually traumatized, constantly tranced, and then programmed during school hours. Since I no longer had my singular school personality and was constantly switching instead, the compartment of my brain that held school memory was no longer consciously retrievable. Therefore, I had no basis for continued learning aside from what I could photographically memorize from class. My grades appeared erratic, ranging from A's to failing, and some A's received I did not earn academically. In my required religion class, Sister Anne Marie had been leading us in study on the topic of confession. This was to prepare us for the kind of confessions we were to be giving Father Vesbit, who was also our school principal. The day Sister ordered us to confession, I refused to go. I unconsciously feared I would be sexually assaulted again in the confessional. This time while my teenage peers waited impatiently outside the door. Sister made an example out of me to the class, saying I was a Satanist and that I was going to hell with seemingly no escape from the occultism that proliferated at the school. I could no longer differentiate between Catholicism and Satanism. Whatever Senator Byrd's purposes in sending me to Catholic school, no one seemed to notice that I had no reason to religiously adhere to Catholic principles. Therefore, the applied reversal of Satanism held no spiritual magic to it either. The wedge of anti-superstition that the Catholic Church was inadvertently driving me into... Oh dear. The wedge of anti-superstition and Catholic school was inadvertently driving into me only served to discount the occult principles and superstitious traumas that they were attempting to use to control me. Satanism is often used as an extreme pain/violence trauma base in Project Monarch mind control, reportedly due to the previous German Nazi Himmler research. I did not adhere to the desired helplessness attitude that was this spiritual warfare and out of the realm of mankind's ability to stop. Regardless of my religious beliefs or disbeliefs, I experienced the results just the same, being subjected to and witnessing trauma so horrible while my body was raped, tortured, and ravaged by men literally drove me out of my mind. Catholic Central did increase my endurance capabilities as planned, however. I signed up for the 2-mile run in the girls' track team as ordered. Muskegon Catholic Central led the state of Michigan in high school athletics, using mind control techniques to modify their star athletes and cause them to excel beyond pre-established records. The school gained national recognition for its contribution to professional leagues with their manufactured programmed athletes. But like Tommy Lasorda, Dodgers, Catholic Central's consistent victories began to raise suspicions and questions. This created a public scandal for the school that threatened to close its doors in 1975. The girls and guys track teams converged after school for practice. I was among the few females singled out for coaching by Coach Cheverini and his hypnotic mind control methodisms. I was among the few females singled out for coaching by Coach Cheverini and his hypnotic mind control methodisms due to my Project Monarch victimization. I was instructed to run 13 miles per day, another corny satanic ploy to get in shape for my 2-mile race. I often ran with a male friend who was the record holder for the 2-mile guys in track. He and I were friends, sharing much due to our similar Project Monarch victimizations. Together we learned how to shut out pain and fatigue when we ran. We tranced into a fast-paced set in our minds by Coach Cheverini, with no comprehension of time or distance. We perceived the track as our yellow brick road, in accordance with the Oz perceived as the track as our yellow brick road. Oh, damn. This is so small of text, I get so easily messed up. Excuse me. We perceived that the track as our yellow brick road in accordance with our Oz-themed programming. Senator Byrd's plan for my physical endurance through Catholic Central's coaching methods proved successful for allowing me to survive his intensely torturous sexual perversions. In addition to routine trips to Mackinac Island and Niagara Falls, My family often took camping trips to get away from it all. In reality, I was taken to key places for ritual abuse, prostitution, and pornography. In the fall of 1974, my father announced we were going to go camping back in time to an old fashioned festival in the small remote town of Cedar Springs, Michigan for their annual Red Flannel Days celebration. My mother told me to pack my jeans and sweaters and my Catholic school uniform, which she had washed and pressed for the occasion. Cedar Springs was quiet, with the festival events including dilapidated amusement rides set up in a small parking lot, and contests where local farmers pitted their mules and horses against each other to see whose could pull the most weight. The man and only street of town the main and only street of town was lined with the few local businesses, including the town's red flannel underwear, Long John's factory. In the center of town, a mock single jail cell had been erected to hold any and all parade participants who failed to wear the required red flannel underwear. The jail was guarded by quasi-Keystone cops. I was amused when the townsfolk began lining up to march in the parade, with very few remaining to watch it. A mentally retarded man carried the baton to lead the parade, followed by kids on bicycles, hay wagons of old folks, a grade school band, and people walking, all in their red flannel underwear. The grand finale of the parade, the town firestruck was approaching, surrounded by numerous motorcycle police. I heard folks whispering, "The president is coming." I assumed they meant the president of the underwear factory. I was wrong. I watched in horror as the fire truck rolled to a stop, and Secret Service helped the President Gerald Ford as he stepped down to the pavement. My father was so excitedly tugging on my arm, half dragging me through the wall of Secret Service agents to talk with President Ford. I looked around nervously at my father. I looked around nervously as my father made the necessary arrangements with Ford to prostitute me to him later that evening. Vanderjack, who never missed a parade, it seemed, was signing autographs. He smiled at me. Someone roughly grabbed my arm. Nervously and startled, I screamed. The crowd laughed as a Keystone cop threw me in jail, scolding me for not wearing my red flannel underwear when I was talking to the president. I was trying to be inconspicuous in hopes no one would see me with the likes of Ford, but then they did not know him as I did. The Keystone cop rattled on and on about how lucky I was until my father paid my bail and I was released from the cell. That night I wore my Catholic uniform as instructed and went into a dissociative trance as my father drove me to the National Guard Armory, where I was prostituted to Ford. Ford took me into an empty room, pushed me down on the wooden floor as he unzipped his pants and said, "Pray on this." Then he brutally sexually assaulted me. Afterward, my memory was compartmentalized through his use of high voltage. I was then carried out to the car, where I lay in the back seat, muscles contracted, stunted in pain, and unable to move. When we got back to Muskegon, my father sent me to the beach as always, to let the repetition of crashing waves against the beach wash my mind free of memory. While I watched the sunset, I was totally locked into the belief that truly there was no place to run, not even to the President of the United States. I remember that the same part of me, my innate personality, seemed to die after seeing Ford as president. I I recall walking up the steps of Catholic Central High School one morning, reaching for the door and crying uncontrollably. I cried myself into a heap at the top of the stairs. I did not even know why I was crying. As a multiple personality disorder, I rarely cried at all. But I was still sobbing hours later when school let out. Someone found me, but I do not recall to this day ever leaving the school steps. I never really experienced emotion after that day until I was rescued, deprogrammed, and reintegrated in 1988. Now all of my brain was functioning through a wide variety of memory compartments, also known as multiple personalities, with no part of me left free of abuse. Now it was as though I had no place to run, not even in my brain. This drove me out of my mind, which is exactly what my abusers needed for total control. We'll do chapter 4. The most dangerous game. Oh dear. When I learned of a pending rendezvous with Senator Byrd in Traverse City, Michigan, Vanderjack's headquarters, I stole some candy at a local convenience market, hoping to go to jail and escape my encounter with Byrd. I was caught, and the police were even called, but of course my politically powerful abusers would not allow for me to have a police record. The entire matter was not so mysteriously and suddenly dropped. My only punishment was to have a conference with the school principal, Father Vesbit. Father Vesbit knew I was part of Project Monarch and handled the matter accordingly. He raped me in the school's private chapel after school while holding a satanic ritual involving several of my project friends. Kids often attached nicknames to their teachers, and there was only a few of us who knew the reason why Father Vesbit was called Father Fuzzbutt. His backside was covered with thick black hair. He counseled me on several occasions, once remarking, "I thought kids in your situation were all part of the exchange student program." My Uncle Bob Tanis was visiting our house soon after that. He had flown in from what he claimed was a Black Ops Air Force intelligence operation. I know now that the typical CIA mode of operations, he was relating a story of lies salted with some truth. The point was to inform me that Catholic Church is justified in its involvement with our government due to the priests hearing confessions from mobsters and spies. He also explained that exchange students were spies in the making, that priests found through confession were problems. Thus they were considered expendable and transferred out of the country. He then suggested to my father that I see the school guidance counselor, CIA operative Dennis Delaney, immediately. My father enthusiastically told me that Delaney was a longtime friend of his from St. Francis, who knew how to handle kids like me. Arrangements were made for me to see him after school. Delaney began informing me that he was aware of everything, and that he knew just what I needed to put me back on track. He said that my family needed to take a trip to the Teton Mountains of Wyoming. He then provided maps and information in an envelope for my father. He turned off the lights in his office and turned on the slide projector. He showed me scenes of the numerous waterfalls of the Tetons, all of which were to wash my brain of the reality that I was performing oral sex on him as ordered while the slides ran. Then he scheduled a follow-up appointment for further counseling. The trip to the Tetons would provide a change of scenery from the unusual Mackinac Island Niagara Falls trip, but I could no longer hope for a change in the direction life was leading me. I was told that my life was predestined and that had to do I could no longer hope for a change in the direction life was leading me. I was told my life was predestined and that I had to do and that all I had to do was follow the road stretched out before me, i.e., the yellow brick road. I was destined for Wyoming, but would not know why until I arrived. I confirmed the family trip to the Tetons when I saw Delaney for my follow-up counseling. He informed me that he had already talked to my father about the trip, as well as our upcoming trip to Disney World in Florida. I was not surprised to learn of an additional trip, nor did I have the capacity to become excited, suspicious, or apprehensive. I was not aware that Delaney was heavily involved in Project Monarch, not only because he was accessing my sexual personalities again, but because he was helping pave the way toward my destiny of total mind control. During Christmas vacation of 1974, my father flew us all to Disney World by route of Tampa, Florida. Ignorant of geography, it did not occur to me that Tampa was out of the way of Disney World until my father drove the rented van to the gates of MacDill Air Force Base. Military personnel met me there and escorted me into the base top secret high-tech mind control conditioning facility for behavior modification programming. This was the first in what became a routine series of mind control testing and or programming sessions on government installations that I would endure throughout my Project Monarch victimization. Whether I was in a military, NASA, or government building, the procedure for maintaining me under total mind control remained consistent with Project Monarch requirements. This included prior physical and or psychological trauma, sleep, food and water deprivation, high-fold electric shock, and hypnotic and or harmonic programming of specific memory compartments/personalities. The high-tech equipment and methodicisms I endured from that time on gave the U.S. government absolute control of my mind and life. I had literally been driven out of my conscious mind and existed only through my programmed subconscious. I lost my free will, ability to reason, and could not think to question anything that was happening to me. I could only do as I was told. After that MacDill Air Force Base experience, my home life worsened. The controls and conditioning that my father and mother executed on me tightened even more. I was no longer permitted to have any contact with my own brothers and sister. I only had one younger sister at the time. This stopped me in my subconscious effort to protect them from my father's abuse and left me with a desperate, empty aching for the loving relationships I previously shared with them. Of course, I never was able to protect them any more than I could defend myself or later protect my own daughter. However, until government programming began, I had routinely babysat them every evening and took them for long walks that lasted for hours in my feeble attempt to keep them out of my parents' range. Subconsciously, I believed I was making a difference. The day my youngest brother told my mother he much preferred my company over hers was the day I could no longer be near him or my other brothers and sister. Apparently, I was making enough of a difference that my parents were compelled to separate me from them. I was ordered to my closet-sized bedroom in the garage as soon as I got home from school or work. I could not speak to, look at, or hug my brothers and sister. I was not permitted to eat dinner with my family, although they let me out of my room to set the table, wash the dishes, and do other chores. If I ventured from my bedroom to use the bathroom and was caught by my mother, she said, nobody rattled your cage, and ordered me back to my room in the garage. In the summer of 1975, my family drove all the way from Michigan to the Teton Mountains of Wyoming. I was ordered to ride in the back storage area of the family Chevy Suburban since I was forbidden to associate or communicate with my brothers and sister. So I dissociated into books, or into the metaphorical hypnotic suggestions from my father, and tranced deeper as I watched the prairie's seemingly endless seas of amber waves of grain streak past my window. Once, when we stopped at a gas station, my father took me inside to show me a stuffed jackalope mounted on the wall. Due to my tranced, dissociative state and a highly suggestibility level, I believed it was indeed a cross between a jackrabbit and antelope. It was 100 plus degrees in the backlands when it cooled down at night. The intense heat of the dry the intense heat of the day accentuated my ever-increasing thirst. My father was physically preparing me through water deprivation for these intense tortures and programming I would endure in Wyoming. Dick Cheney, then White House Chief of Staff to President Ford, later Secretary of Defense to President George Bush, documented member of the Council of Foreign Relations, CFR, and presidential hopeful for 1996, was originally Wyoming's only congressman. Dick Cheney was the reason my family had traveled to Wyoming, where I endured yet another form of brutality, his version of a most dangerous game, or human hunting. It is my understanding that now a most dangerous game was devised to condition military personnel in survival and combat maneuvers, yet it was useful on me and other slaves known to me as a means of further conditioning the mind to the realization that there was no place to hide, as well as traumatize the victim for ensuing programming. It was my experience over the years that a most dangerous game had numerous variations on the primary theme of being stripped naked and turned loose in the wilderness, and while being hunted by men and dogs. In reality, all wilderness areas were enclosed in secure military fencing, whereby it was only a matter of time until I was caught, repeatedly raped and tortured. Dick Cheney had an apparent addiction to the thrill of the sport. He appeared obsessed with playing a most dangerous game as a means of traumatizing mind control victims, as well as to satisfy his own perverse sexual kinks. My introduction to the game occurred upon arrival as My introduction to the game occurred upon arrival at the hunting lodge near Grable, Wyoming, and it physically and psychologically devastated me. I was sufficiently traumatized for Cheney's programming as I stood naked in his hunting lodge office after being hunted down and caught. Cheney was talk Ch- Ch- Cheney was talking as he paced around me. I could stuff you and mount you like a jackalope, and call you a two-legged deer. Or I could stuff you with this. He unzipped his pants and revealed his oversized penis right down your throat, and then mount you. Which do you prefer? Blood and sweat became mixed with the dirt on my body and slid like mud down my legs and shoulder. I throbbed with exhaustion and pain as I stood unable to think to answer such a question. Make up your mind, Cheney coaxed. Unable to speak, I remained silent. You don't get a choice anyway. I make up your mind for you. That's why you are here. For me to make you a mind, and make you mine mind. Mind/mind. You lost your mind long ago. Now I'm going to give you one. Just like the Wizard of Oz gave Scarecrow a brain, the yellow brick road led you here to me. You've come such a long, long way for your brain, and I will give you one. The blood reached my shoes and caught my attention. I had been further along in my programming. I perhaps would never have noticed such a thing or had the capacity to think to wipe it away, but so far I had only been to MacDill and Disney World for government/military programming. At last, when I could speak, I begged, "If you don't mind, can I please use your bathroom?" Cheney's face turned red with rage. He was on me in an instant, slamming my back into the wall, with one arm across my chest and his hand on my throat, choking me while applying pressure to the carotid artery in my neck with his thumb. His eyes bulged and he spit as he growled, "If you don't mind me, I will kill you. I could kill you. Kill you with my bare hands. You're not the first and you won't be the last. I'll kill you any time I goddamn well please." He flung me on the cot-type bed that as behind me. There he finished, taking his rage out on me sexually. On the long trip to Michigan, I lay in a heap behind the seats of the Suburban, nauseated with hurting from Cheney's brutality and high-voltage tortures, plus the whole Wyoming experience. My father stopped by the waterfalls flowing through the Tetons to wash my brain of the memory of Cheney. I could barely walk through the woods to the falls for the process as instructed, despite having learned my lessons well from Cheney on following orders. The next year, when our annual trip to Disney World rolled around, my father drove, pulling his new holiday Rambler Royale International trailer. I slept outside in a tent because I was not permitted inside since I wasn't family. My father dropped me off en route at the Kennedy Space Center in Titusville, Florida, where I was subjected to my first NASA programming. From then on, I was obsessed with the following yellow brick road to Nashville, Tennessee. Moving to Nashville was all I could talk about. If anyone asked me the question, I could not think to ask myself why. I would respond by reiterating it was something I had to do. I had gone through the motions of my senior year in a dissociative trance. I became further distanced from my religious values by my religion class teacher, Brother Emmett. This was due to his promotion of cannibalism via Pierre Paul Reed's book Alive, and by his teachings and religious Corseal retreat I attended that included a cult ritual at St. Francis Church. I graduated from Muskegon Catholic Central High School in our bicentennial year of 1976. I was led by Senator Byrd to revise my plan to attend Hope College like I had promised Vanderjack as a child. This new plan for me to temporarily attend Muskegon Community College because my real education was to come through mind control programming, not school. In order to be exhausted, as was necessary for my real education, I worked 3 menial jobs in addition to attending college. During my first semester of college in 1976, I made plans to take a trip to Nashville with my Project Monarch friend from Catholic Central. She remains as an expendable victim to date, and therefore her identity must be protected from public release for her safety. My father explained that I was to stay at the Fiddler's Inn in Nashville, see the world-famous Printers Alley row of sleazy country music nightclubs, and attend the Grand Ole Opry on Friday night, as ticket arrangements had been made through a friend in spite of their scarcity during the Thanksgiving holiday. I never thought to associate Fiddler's Inn with Senator Byrd's fiddle playing when my friend and I arrived in Music City, USA, nor did I find it odd when a country music star entertaining at Black Poodle nightclub in Printer's Alley began directing my activities. My friend and I were provided with free passes to the Black Poodle to encourage us to return each night when entertainer and CIA operative Jack Green and his Desperado band were playing. During the breaks between sets, Green and his band would sit with my friend and me to manipulate our suggestible minds. I was told it was my destiny to have met band member Wayne Cox, who had been trained for paramilitary mercenary operations under Louisiana U.S. Senator J. Bennett Johnson. I soon learned that everyone associated with Green was involved in his CIA Freedom Train operations. When I told Green that my friend and I would not be returning on Friday night due to attending the Grand Ole Opry, he told us that he would be working the Opry that night. He made arrangements for us to come backstage and see him immediately following his segment. He explained that the security guard at the Opry Nashville Metro Police, Lieutenant Bob Ezell, was a good friend of his and would let us in. At the Opry, my friend and I sat in the audience watching as Jack Green introduced his special guest, U.S. Senator Robert C. Byrd. At that sight of Byrd, I went into a preconditioned deep trance and robotically went through the motions of following Green's instructions. Once backstage, Green pointed out in his dressing room, which he was sharing with Senator Byrd, and ordered me in. The personality that had been sitting in the audience had perceived Byrd as an entertainer and could not or would not think further. But as I walked into the dressing room and saw Byrd perched on the edge of a mirrored vanity in his boxer shorts, I switched into the child personality that had known him as a U.S. Senator on Mackinac Island since age 13, and responded sexually. Afterward, Byrd was claiming me as his, excitedly telling me that he had always wanted his own little witch. I soon learned the enormity of this statement. Jack Green's band member Wayne Cox later told me that playing music behind Senator Byrd at the Opry was not the only way he backed him. He also backed him politically and in Freedom Train operations. Cox then made arrangements for my friend and me to stay the remainder of our trip at his trailer in Hendersonville, Tennessee. There was no choice but to comply. The following night, after Jack Green completed his show at the Black Poodle, he drove my friend and me to a nearby participating after-hours club, the Demon's Den. There, Cox was to pick us up and take us to Hendersonville. Instead, we were slipped a drug and taken on a tour of Union Station, Nashville's then abandoned train station, where supposedly the only train still running through there was the Freedom Train. Senator Byrd's attempted cultivation of superstition through my Catholic schooling should have maximized the impact of the occult ritual I was subjected to in the tower of the old stone and slate turn-of-the-century train depot, but the pain and horror was sufficiently effective in itself, even without my adhering to superstition, to produce the intended mind-shattering results. Cox took my friend and me on a flashlight tour through the rubble of Union Station until we came to a homeless man sleeping on the ground. Cox ordered me to kill the railroad bum. Cox ordered me to kiss the railroad bum goodbye, then shot him between the eyes while I was still only inches away, then used a machete to chop off the man's hand, which he put in a Ziploc bag. Then he led us up the rickety stairs into the towers of the old depot. There Jack Green and his band members and others dressed in black robes were gathered around a black leather altar in a room lit by candles and draped in red velvet. In total shock, I was laid on the altar and subjected to rape and torture, while the participants indulged in sex, blood, and cannibalism ritual. The next day, I woke up on Cox's couch, vaguely aware that I had suffered a bad nightmare. When I stood up, I passed out from blood loss. I was bleeding profusely from the vagina. It was all I could do to prepare to drive back to Michigan, and my friend was certainly not in a stable frame of mind to help. I did not know what happened to me, nor was I able to question it. I had a new obsession on my mind. I had been programmed at the ritual to move to Nashville and marry Cox as ordered by Senator Byrd. Back in Michigan, I made the announcement to my parents that I was moving to Nashville to marry Cox, and it was predestination. What they would not tell me was that my father had just literally sold me to Senator Byrd in exchange for lucrative military contracts that made him a millionaire overnight, a millionaire on a 6th grade education, a perverse child exploiting criminal immune from prosecution, working as a CIA operative for the U.S. government. That mind-shattering occult ritual I endured in Nashville marked a new life of wealth and prestige for my father while thrusting me into a new phase of my torturous existence. And I had no choice in any of it. And that's it for today's horrifying reading.